Starting this podcast was an unexpected step of obedience of something that God has called me to do. Through this podcast, I will be interviewing ordinary people who have seen and experienced God move in extraordinary ways throughout their lives. I pray that this will build your faith and encourage you to testify of God's goodness in your everyday lives. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Testify of God's Goodness podcast. We have here with us Leah Taylor.
Hello.
So we're really excited to have her
Yes.
here today and just to share a little about her life and what God's done and really the highs and the lows.
Yes.
So tell us about yourself. So your work or your callings in life and your family and how do we know each other?
So I grew up in Hampshire County my whole life. Actually, I
Same.
came here to Covenant my whole life. We started coming here, I think, right when I was about 1 year old.
Okay.
So I've always just came here. Really, I didn't stop coming here until I got married. So about 25. So I came here about 25 years. And then I became Pentecostal with my husband's church. Yeah, that was a big difference going from a Southern Baptist to Pentecostal.
Yes.
That's still a big adjustment. I grew up pretty a normal life. I had a brother and a sister, a mom and a dad. It was pretty average middle class family. We always came to church. We always just did the regular things, to play the sports and do all the fun things that families do. When I got to high school, my dad passed away my senior year. So that was a big adjustment. That same time, my sister moved out to college. Yeah. And so it was just me and mom. We went from a family of 5, because my brother's older, he moved out already, to a family of 2. And so that was a big adjustment. Yeah. I started working for the county as a teacher's aide shortly after I graduated from high school. I took the classes and I really enjoyed that. I've always loved working with kids. Here at Covenant, I was the nursery director. And so I always just had always a calling for kids and working with children. And then once I started working for the county, it went a step further into not just children, but children with special needs. And that was even a higher calling on my life, working in special education. And so I have done that now for, I believe I'm on year 8 working with the county. So it's been, which I did make the change. This year is the first year that I'm not in special education. Really? So that's been a big adjustment. I work in first grade now with my babies. And it's just been amazing. I always worked with, for the past 5 years, I worked with older middle school kids also. So that's been a big adjustment. This is also the first year that I've really worked with another Christian. So my teacher is a Christian.
That makes it so nice.
It's a huge difference. It's just like, a kid brings up God, and it's like we just stop class and we take it and run with it, because the kid brought it up. And so
exactly.
we just take it and run with it. So it's just been amazing working with her and working, God working through us into those little, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. It's been amazing. And so actually 5 years this month is when I met my husband.
Wow.
Yes, we started dating January 20th, I believe. We dated for about 10, 11 months, and then he proposed. And we got married the following July, the last day of July, we got married. And then that September, I found out I was pregnant.
Were you guys trying? Or?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess we weren't, not trying.
Yes.
And so it happened. And then that is what brings us to being pregnant with our daughter, and then finding out, actually December of that year, we found out about her heart problem. And so is this like what we want to go into? So we found out that on the same day we found out she was a little girl. We actually the tech, she said it's a little girl, and I was so excited. And my husband obviously wanted the little boy, and so but he was so excited too. And the tech left, and then she was gone for a long time, like what felt like hours and hours. And then another person came in. She said the doctor would be in, and another, I guess, doctor came in and let us know that something was wrong with baby's heart. They didn't know exactly what was wrong with baby's heart, but they knew that something was wrong with baby's heart.
Yeah.
And she then said that she had to leave and another person was going to come in. We saw a lot of people that day.
Wow.
And actually, I remember she got down a box of tissues and kind of laughed and said, you're probably going to need these. And she left. And that sticks out in my head, that the way she handled that. Yeah. But and then another person came in, and that was the person that spoke to us about, I guess, kind of genetics and the heart and everything like that. And we had to turn down an abortion from her for our baby girl. That's something that you just never, you go in to parenthood and planning to have a baby, and you never stop to think about that moment in your life of having to turn down an abortion for your baby.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's something we did. And then after, obviously, we turned that down, the doctor from before came back in and told us that, okay, we were keeping the baby and we were pursuing this baby. And so now we had to figure out the best plan of health for our baby.
Right.
And so she brought up two options for us. We could do Charlottesville, UVA, or Morgantown, Ruby Memorial Hospital. And my husband leaned more towards Morgantown, just because it is a little closer to us.
Yeah.
It's in state. He was more familiar with the Morgantown area. And she said, well, they aren't really competent in taking care of babies with heart issues at this point. And so then we said, well, okay, then we're going to do what's best for baby. Right. And we will go to Charlottesville, UVA. And so that kind of took a seat until February. And February 14th, our heart, our heart day, we made the trip to Charlottesville. His parents actually took us. They went so that we wouldn't have to worry about, parking and trying to figure everything out. Yeah. That was really nice. And I had myself so convinced, I prayed and I believed that we were going to go there, and it was the holiday for the heart, and they were just going to go and tell us that everything was fine with our baby's heart. Yeah. And so we would go, and there was still something wrong with her heart. It's hypoplastic right heart syndrome, with a severely hypoplastic tricuspid valve and pulmonary atresia. And to us, those were just words. Yeah. We didn't have a clue what any of it meant. They brought down the papers and the charts and pictures and drawings, and they tried to explain to us the best they could. And so pretty much the right side of her heart just didn't form when she was inside of me. It didn't grow the way it should. And so essentially she only had the left side of her heart that worked and was pumping blood into her body and her lungs. And so they informed us that she would need 3 surgeries, is what it was looking like after she was born. The first surgery would be an open heart surgery pretty shortly after she was born. The following surgery would be about 6 months of age, another open heart surgery. And then about 3 to 5 years of age would be her final step of the surgery. They also informed us at that point that we should probably look into finding arrangements to move down there, to carry out the rest of my pregnancy down there. And then afterwards, probably we would be looking at living down there for about 6 months. After she was born, she would have to stay in the hospital for that long until she was stable enough to do the next part of her surgery at about 6 months of age. She would need constant monitoring, and she would need to live in the hospital until she got to that more stable part. After that next surgery, she would be more stable.
Okay.
And then she could come home with us. And so I remember just leaving there totally defeated, and depressed and anxious. And that's when I really started battling with the anxiety and the depression. And then the next month, March came, and we got a letter. I got a letter from my insurance company, PIA, because I work for the county. We have state insurance. That's important.
Right.
To note that I have state insurance. And so I opened up the letter, and it was informing me that they would not be covering any part of my Charlottesville trip, because we chose to go to Charlottesville instead of going to an in-state and in-network hospital like WVU Medicine in Morgantown. And so at the bottom of the letter, well, it gave us the price, and it was thousands of dollars just for that consult. It was thousands of dollars. And so at that point, we were looking at, they were not going to cover any of her trips or anything that happened at UVA. They were not going to cover any of it. And at the bottom, it gives a reason, kind of like a code as to why they chose not to. And it said, services offered in state. And then it listed the hospital that it was available at, and it was Ruby in Morgantown, that those services were offered in Morgantown. And so I remember I called insurance and said, that's not what we were told. Our doctor told us that Morgantown just wasn't able to handle this. And we had to go to UVA. And insurance said, no, that's just not our information. And so I called Morgantown and spoke with, her name was Teal, and she has just been awesome. She's like a nurse coordinator kind of for this program, the heart program. And she informed us that they were actually starting like a kickstart program, and they were really starting to build up their cardiology and pediatrics, and that they did have a surgeon, and they actually were able and competent, and actually they had a really great heart surgeon that came from Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
And so then it was like, okay, wait a minute. So then that's kind of when things kind of started taking a turn in our lives. And so we did make the switch to Morgantown. And that was March. I was due in May. And so that was a big deal. So then we started going for our ultrasounds and our echocardiograms, everything for the baby up in Morgantown. And we met with the doctors up there, and we found out same information with her heart. It was, the same diagnosis. They just handled things a little bit differently, and we weren't looking at a 6-month stay in the hospital. We were able to, they had a program that we could bring her home until her next surgery needed at about 6 months. And it was a lot though. Like I had to measure how much she was eating every time she ate. It was how much she ate. It was weighing her every day. It was checking her oxygen levels twice a day. And so and they sent us home with all that equipment to do. And that was a lot, but we weren't living in a hospital,
right.
And so we got to the point of May and we were ready to have her. And so I was induced about a week early because they just didn't want to risk me going into labor, because she did need special medicine as soon as she was born, just to help keep things where they needed to be until they could do the surgery on her. And so on May 16th, right after midnight, we started the induction process. And then it was a really easy labor. It was a super easy labor. Like, if that was the only part of having babies, I'd have 20 more, you know, that was the easy part. And she came into the world at 11:07 on May 16th. It was a very easy birth. She was great. She weighed 7 pounds, 7 ounces, which that was huge because they warned us that these babies with this condition have issues with gaining weight.
Okay.
And so just the fact that she was here and she was over 7 pounds was just, you know, a miracle in itself. And so they placed her on my belly for about 10 seconds, just, you know, long enough to wipe her. And then she was gone. Like, that's all I had to hold on to, was that 10 seconds with her. It's a teaching hospital, you know, because it's right there with the college. Yeah. And so they let a student deliver her right there. The doctor was right there, but they let a student deliver her. And she kind of fumbled a little bit, and I ended up losing a lot of blood. And so, yeah, when the actual doctor, she said, "No, not like that." And then things kind of went a little south. And so that wasn't really reassuring. But that was hard because there I was, and they were trying to help me and keep me calm. And my husband, Matthew, was there. But our daughter was right through a door getting, you know, weighed, and they were looking at her and everything. And so he was trying to be with me and with her at the same time. And it was just, it was hard on him. I know it was. And so, and, you know, then it was hard on me as well, because I wanted my husband there with me. You know, I knew something was up, and I wanted him to be there with me. But then, you know, our little girl was right next door, and I wanted him with her as well. So that was hard. So then after they got me into my room, we just weren't able to see Lila. She had to go into like the cath lab and have some heart catheterizations done to look at everything. They had to keep her under, you know, close watch in the PICU. And so it wasn't really an option to see her yet. And so that's hard. You know, I had my phone, and one of the nurses, there was a lot of nurses in the room when she was born, had taken my phone and took pictures for me. And so that was all I had to look at, was my phone, and look at pictures of my baby, and that, you know, have that 10 seconds to hold on to her and just remember that. And so then the doctor came back from the heart cath, and he said that the news was she still needed the procedure done. But he was able to go in through her groin instead of cutting her open. And so that, you know, this is where the but gods really start coming in. You know, like we were looking at an open heart surgery on our 1-day-old, but God was able to make it to where he could go in. It was just a small incision in her groin area, and he fed whatever he needed to up through her body. And then that's how they were able to do the first surgery. And it was just a Band-Aid. Like, it wasn't stitches or anything. It was just a little Band-Aid on the crevice of her leg. And that was the first part of her surgery. That was, you know, part 1 of 3. And then, of course, we were told that we would probably be in the hospital a little while. It was 1 week later, we got to bring her home.
Wow.
And so that was another, you know, but God, you know, we didn't know what to expect, how long we were going to be living in this hospital. But God, we were able to bring her home exactly 1 week later.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. But then that is also where it did get hard as her mom. And, you know, my husband had to go back to work. And so it was me with this little girl. And, you know, we had this program that I had to enter in how much she ate,
Mm-hmm.
how much she weighed, her oxygen levels twice a day. So that way the nurse, Teal, was able to look at everything and monitor and make sure she was okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that kept us from having to live in the hospital. So we did it. And we had to make weekly trips to Morgantown. So once a week until she was able to have her neck surgery, we were going to Morgantown.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my husband, he couldn't just call off work all the time. And so my mom really stepped up and his mom really stepped up. And I never went to an appointment alone. They were always with me. And God has blessed me with such amazing in-laws and such an amazing mom.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really makes a difference having that support system. And so we were looking at about 6 months because, again, those babies have issues with gaining weight, and she had to be at a good weight in order to do that neck surgery. At about 3.5 months of age, the doctor was just so impressed with how much, but God, how much she had gained and how big she has grown.
Yeah.
And he said, we're able to do this next surgery on her.
Wow.
And so about 3 months early than what we were anticipating, she was able to have this next surgery. This was an open heart surgery, and we were anticipating that. And then this was another surgery that, hey, you're looking at a few weeks living in the hospital just because, and it was a hard surgery because essentially they disconnected something in her heart and connected it to where it needed to be so that the blood could just flow and not need to go through that right side of her heart. And so that way it was doing the job it needed to do. It just wasn't doing it how, our hearts do it.
Yeah.
And so with that, she was not used to all that blood flow because at that point, like, her oxygen levels were in the mid to high 70s, 80. And whereas, ours are 98, 99, 100.
Yeah.
And so she was not used to that. And so with that came a lot of pressure in her head that she just was not used to, and it hurt. Like, it hurt her bad. And so she had to be on morphine.
Wow.
For whenever she was awake. They just had to give her the morphine because she was passing out. She was waking up and passing out from the pain. And to see your 3-month-old do that, and again, nobody prepares you for that point in parenthood.
Right.
Of, you think about bringing your little baby home and loving on them. You don't think about watching them wake up and having so much pain that they pass out.
Right.
And so she didn't have to be on morphine for a few days. She was just living on morphine. And so eventually she was used to that pressure in her head and used to the new way that her body was handling the blood flow so that the pain did subside and she was doing good. And 1 week later, we were able to bring her home. And so that's another, just but God, he just worked. And we didn't stay in there for weeks. And actually my husband, because it was only just that 1 week, he was able to stay the whole time. Like, after that point, he was looking at, he was going to have to travel back and forth and go to work. Right. But God made it to where she was able to come home 1 week later. And then at that point, she was more stable. And so all of the checking her oxygen stopped. And weighing her stopped. I got to turn all that equipment in, and that was just one of the best days of my life, was getting rid of that equipment out of her nursery, and I started calling her a normal baby then, and so she was off the medications she was having to take, to get her heart to pump at a normal rate and to keep her calm. And so she was on a lot of medicines down to one medicine, and it was, or two medicines, just to keep her heart, steady.
Yeah.
And then eventually she was able to be weaned off that, and she was down to just a baby aspirin every day.
Okay.
Just to keep her blood thin and prevent any clots, anything like that. She was down to half a baby aspirin every day.
Okay.
And so, and then that, was an amazing feeling of throwing all those medicine bottles away and just having her take that one pill. And then at that point, our lives were normal for us, I guess, that, things calmed down.
Yeah.
And the anxiety, it never went away, and it probably did worsen, because then at that point, the weekly trips to Morgantown eventually stopped also. And so then, I didn't have that peace of mind of they were looking at her heart once a week and we knew that it was doing okay. And so the anxiety probably did at that point go up.
Yeah.
I think at that point, the depression kind of receded. It wasn't as bad. The depression did eventually ease up on me, but the anxiety just, as much as the depression went away, the anxiety just, filled that up even more. And so just with her health, and every time she got sick, as soon as she started running a fever, her cardiologist required us to take her to the emergency room just because of her heart. And so it was like I was just panicked and worried over, was she going to catch something? Were we going to have to take her to the emergency room? How long were we going to have to, live in Morgantown if she did get sick and have to be in the PICU again? And so it really was a big worry for me at that point.
Yeah.
And it did cause issues in our marriage.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that I really had to try hard to work through. But I failed every day. I mean, the anxiety just won every day. And so at that point, but she grew and she kept growing and she didn't get sick. I think one time she had strep.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the times, every time she was sick was an ear infection, And so I really thank God was in that also. You think about babies and how easy it is for them to get sick. And so, but God, he, every time she got sick, it was an ear infection.
Yeah.
And so, we gave her the Tylenol and the antibiotic and it was cleared up within a couple of days.
Yeah.
But she got a lot of ear infections,
like
a lot. And that was just, I guess her thing was just her ears.
That's how Madeline is too.
Yeah. And so eventually we did go and have the tubes put in her ears and she's just been great. I mean, we are getting over strep right now. And so in her, she'll be 3 in May. And in her years, she's had strep twice. Wow. And that's like the only, other than her ears, that's been her sickness.
Yeah.
And so God has just really worked there also in keeping her healthy and keeping her safe and knowing that I think I needed that as much as Lila needed to be healthy. My anxiety needed him to work there also.
Yeah.
Yeah.